These are the fabulous Marx Brothers, who created a style of comedy that has never been matched. Their target was the establishment, and they specialized in throwing low blows at people in high places.
Hello, this is Matthew Coniam welcoming you to the Marx Brothers Council Podcast, episode 27. Imagine a Marx Brothers compilation best-of highlights type film, somewhat in the manner of Harold Lloyd's World of Comedy or The Crazy World of Laurel and Hardy. Imagine further that the film should feature one sequence and one sequence only from each of the Marx's 13 feature films. Imagine then that you have been handed the task of deciding which bit of which film gets to go in. Jack Lemmon once sang, "Imagine there's no heaven, it's easy if you try." But there's nothing remotely easy about the agony of selecting and rejecting that would ensue from this mission, should you choose to accept it. And this is the fiendish ordeal to which I've subjected myself and my cohorts for this edition of the podcast. Each of us has made our 13 picks, weeping into our handkerchiefs at the ones that got away, even as we settle happily on the ones that will have immortality bestowed upon them. None of us knows at this point which scenes the others have chosen, nor even what criteria has governed our respective selections. Have we made tactical choices, trying to make each clip complement the others to give flow and proportion to the whole, and to give a fair shake to the team's many gifts and styles? Or have we just gone for the yocks to produce a straightforward greatest hits collection that will leave potential audiences teary-eyed and exhausted? That's what we're about to find out. We could have called the episode Monkey Best List, A Day at the Greatest, or even Go Best. But instead, we've opted to call it a compilation, a sandwich, and you. So, without further ado, it's time to find out who my co-hosts are going to be this time, as I open the sealed envelopes with their names inside. This is very exciting. I'm now about to open envelope number 1, and for those of you listening with your ears only, I'm using an antique Edwardian sterling silver paper knife with a polished tortoiseshell handle. And my first co-host is a New Yorker who masterminded and starred in the groundbreaking revival of the Marx's Broadway hit I'll Say She Is, and wrote about it in the book Gimme a Thrill. He enjoys golf, voodoo, and staring at the underside of bus seats, and his life's ambition is to turn South Pacific into a musical. Put your hands together, your feet apart, and your teeth in a glass of water for Noah Diamond.
Thank you very much. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
And joining him is the person in envelope number 2. And no, you're wrong. Funny. I thought it was going to be him as well. But it's actually a professional video editor hailing from Chicago, home of the legendary Boston Red Sox and the rarely glimpsed North Carolina Puma. As well as editor and producer of the podcast, he's also a hot tub salesman whose life's ambition is to sell a hot tub. It's Bob Cassell.
Hi, everybody. And as usual, there will be a really funny comment inserted here later on.
Now, before plunging into our lists and our discussion, I should point out...
Do you want that in the podcast?
No, I'll put it in one of the envelopes. Okay. Before plunging, I should point out that the one rule I did insist on and almost instantly regretted was that the ordering should be strictly chronological. In other words, we are not at liberty to put our favourite opening scene at the start or our favourite finale at the end. I thought that would be too easy, but I didn't quite realise that the alternative would be so hard.
If I was a producer, that would be a deal breaker for me. I'll tell you.
Yeah.
You know?
No, I understand. The issue of introducing the team I solved by deciding we would start with the theatrical agent sketch from The House That Shadows Built, which, though technically post-dating their first 2 films, derives in its essence from their pre-film theatrical career. And since each brother gets his share of the limelight in it and his own individual entrance, I thought it would make the ideal opener. But that still leaves us with a running order that starts at Paramount and builds up to Love Happy as a crescendo. So before we plunge, a few general thoughts. First, I suppose, is how come there isn't a film like this? I know, obviously, their work was split over 2 studios, but that could have been got around. You know, Paramount's world of the Marx Brothers would have had some takers, surely.
Well, perhaps not having access to animal crackers and only having 4 of the films put the kibosh on that.
Well, unless having that reason would have prompted them to get it sorted out.
To be honest, I don't even know if there was really a need for one. The brothers really hadn't gone away. A lot of these compilations were done with the long-forgotten silent comedians who people didn't know. But the Marxes were still around. Groucho was on TV every week. The films were still relatively popular on TV. Even Harpo and Chico were still fairly popular on TV guest appearances and so forth. So, the brothers were still around. I don't know if they really needed to be reintroduced to an audience.
On the other hand, the 90 best minutes of the Marx Brothers would be quite a thing to have all in one place. And, it would have been, in my estimation, and probably that of many of our listeners, the best 90 minutes of comedy available, period.
To be honest, though, I'm glad it didn't happen. It forced people to sit through the whole films.
It might have lent itself slightly better to silent comedy, because there's a further barrier to entry for silent comedy with modern audiences, and taking the highlights of a silent comedy career and packaging them up with some narration and a new soundtrack, that does seem like maybe a sounder commercial project.
I guess the other thing to bear in mind is that although the plots aren't important, they do have plots. And so very often, if you take a scene out of context, you won't quite know what's happening. Whereas Harold Lloyd, for instance, his films lend themselves very well to having bits taken out of them because they were constructed in that way. But it would, in a lot of cases, you would say, well, this is a great scene, but you'd need another one to explain what's happening.
Perhaps the fact that Universal was controlling the Paramount films had something to do with it. Maybe they didn't want to really deal with that whole promoting another studio's work.
That's a thought, yeah. Because obviously they did the Abbott and Costello film in 1965, so they were of that mindset. But yeah, maybe they thought it was just a free boost to the other team.
And we should note that scenes of theirs were used in other compilations, in the Big Parade of Comedy and That's Entertainment Part 2, I believe it is. So
yeah,
they were in compilations, just not their own.
So did you find this harder than you thought, or easier than you thought, or somewhere in between?
For me, it depended on what standards I applied. You left us a pretty wide berth to come up with our own criteria for making these choices. And I had to decide, all right, is it going to be, as you said in your intro, is it just going to be the biggest laughs, the great favorite highlights? Am I going to attempt some continuity or variety? That was challenging. And I think picking my favorite scene in each film, that's sort of a pleasure. But making it a coherent whole, I sort of gave up on.
Yeah, I approached it as if it was an entire film that I had to put together. All the pieces had to fit. And I wanted to show all the different aspects of the Marxist humor. And I didn't want to have like 3 scenes in a row without Chico or back-to-back musical numbers. So that really affected my my choices along the way.
Yeah, that's kind of how I went at it. But the one problem I had is that I didn't want to make sort of token choices. In other words, I didn't want to get to At the Circus, realize that I hadn't included Groucho and Margaret Dumont, and then throw in their scene from that one because it's not very good, and it would have been bad to have left out all the great ones, So I wanted everything that was in it that represents a facet of what they do. I decided had to show that facet at or near its best.
Hey, I got a question here. I'm curious, which film was hardest for you guys to pick a scene from?
Room Service.
I found that the easiest.
Yes, because there's only one. I suspect we've got the same one for all three. But
yeah,
for me, it was Monkey Business. I'm tipping my hand here. I probably would have gone with the passport scene, but because the House of Shadows built echoes it so much, I didn't want to really go there.
Oh, yes.
So I had to go somewhere else. And I'll go into more detail about why that was harder for me later on.
Yeah. I mean, as it went along, I found all of them harder and harder because I was trying to accommodate what I'd already decided with the others. And some of them I did go back and change early ones. But I found Circus pretty hard, and Go West, obviously. But also Night in Casablanca wasn't easy, I didn't think.
I should say Room Service it was hard to have to pick a scene from Room Service. Which scene to pick was easy. Animal Crackers was difficult. If you asked me for a 100-minute highlight reel of the best of the Marx Brothers, I would just give you Animal Crackers.
Yeah.
On the other hand, it comes early in the chronology, so there wasn't as much of a need to think about variety and continuity.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I'll start the ball rolling with Coconuts then. Before I decided on House That Shadows Built at the start, I thought it would be easy. It would have to be the scene of the four of them entering and meeting in the lobby. But having had the necessity for that taken away, I was given slightly more of a task than I was expecting. I considered the auction, although I had to bear in mind that a lot of people don't really like that as much as I do. Similarly, the connecting doors routine, I thought there were later things that did a better job, perhaps, of that kind of frantic physical humour. So I'm afraid in the end I made an extremely boring choice and went with Wire Duck, because I wanted a Groucho and Chico scene. I didn't want it to be any of them after Coconuts or Animal Crackers. And Animal Crackers I had very firmly booked. So Wire Duck it was. Bob.
Yeah, I went through a very similar debate on this one. I was really close to picking the Wire Duck scene. It's my favorite, actually, of all the Groucho Chico dialogues. But in the end, I ended up going with the opening with the brothers meeting each other for the first time. I just couldn't pass it up. To me, it's the most fun, most energetic scene in the film. We get to see everything we need to know about the Marxes in those couple of minutes. As much as I love the House That Shadows Built scene, they're not really interacting. They're not really being their iconic selves. But in this scene, we're really getting to meet the Marxes. And, Harpo comes in and steals the show. We see his entire bag of tricks, giving people his leg and everything. It's just hard for me to think of anything else in the film that gives me more enjoyment. So I'm going with that.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, that definitely was going to be my first choice, but I decided not to, purely because it was coming in second.
Well, I picked the same scene as Bob, and for the same reason. But yeah, it's the passage in Coconuts that I get the most joy from, and it seems the most archetypal. And just the fact that it's the four brothers staging this piece of business by themselves, it really feels very much like what it might have been like to see them on stage. My runner-up choice here would be the connecting hotel rooms piece later on, because it's so well done, and it's done with such confidence and brio. And I think for me, that is my favorite version of that scene that they did on film. But the lobby by a hair. Right.
So that's two votes for the lobby. So that means it's in a very strong fighting position, but it would mean, if we went for that there would have to be a good Groucho Chico scene somewhere else. So I'm putting a cautious question mark next to that one.
So let's see if we get this straight. You're like the executive producer.
I am in charge. Yeah, it's entirely my decision. Democracy. Okay, so let's try Animal Crackers then, and let's start with Bob.
Man, choosing this was like being at the world's best buffet. I could have gone 100 different ways and anything would have been good. But in the end, I ended up going with the back-to-back encounters with Roscoe W. Chandler. First, Harpo and Chico on the stairs, and then Groucho's great scene. Harpo and Chico just make total mincemeat out of him, stealing his birthmark, stealing his garters, and how could that be topped? But Groucho somehow does it, and I think this is one of Groucho's great moments. It's just two guys sitting around talking for 4 minutes. It's almost like a You Bet Your Life pre-interview. It's what the Marxes lost once they went to Hollywood. You would not get these extended scenes. So I really savor these and want to appreciate it. So because we don't really get them after Animal Crackers.
Okay. And Noah?
Well, that is hard to argue with, but I chose the strange interlude scene, meaning the proposal, the bigamy bit leading into the strange interlude piece. I think I've said before that I think if I had to choose, this is my favorite scene in the whole Marx Brothers canon, with the small regret that it only has one Marx brother in it. So I couldn't really give the strange interlude scene to somebody as an example of the Marx Brothers. But as an example of Groucho in this period, I don't think it can be topped. And among its great pleasures is the fact that it has this obscure parody element to it. And yet, I don't think I know anybody who first saw this scene already knowing what Strange Interlude was. And it's obviously not a prerequisite for enjoying it. And I just find Groucho transcendent and beautiful in this scene.
Did anyone ever tell you had beautiful eyes?
No.
Well, you have. And so have you. He shot her a glance. Has a smile played around his lip. Yes, I don't think I've ever seen 4 more beautiful eyes in my life. Well, 3 anyway.
So that's my choice. And also it has the added advantage of being a very solid Margaret Dumont scene, the first part of it.
So this is a better part of the canon than the canon in and never mind. I was going to make an At the Circus joke. Never mind.
I gotcha.
Okay. Forget it.
You tried to make a joke there, but you didn't know it was loaded.
And it's interesting what you were saying there about it being a scene with only one Marx Brother in it, because I presume that, like me, that was something that you were particularly alert to, was that as we went along, they should each get a fair crack. But one thing I was surprised at is that I was assuming going in that most of my choices, if I didn't think about them, would favor Groucho. But when I actually looked at the first list I drew up, he was actually surprisingly underrepresented. And I actually had to go back in and Groucho things up a bit, which I certainly wasn't expecting. But Animal Crackers, is one of the ones that I Grouchoed up a bit. I went for the soiree, the African lecture, and Chico's musical spot. And that was the main reason for it, is because it did kill 2 birds with 1 stone there. It got a fabulous Groucho monologue, one of his very best, I think, plus some Margaret Dumont, plus some Harpo, and absolutely excellent Chico at the piano.
Yeah, that would have been my second choice.
So we've got a three-way tie here.
Hey, Matthew, I don't know what you were thinking when you came up with this idea, but if you expected us to be screaming at each other about these Paramount films,
well, wait and see.
What film are you watching?
That may happen yet, but probably not for a while. Okay, then moving on to Monkey Business, and we'll start with Noah this time.
Well, I picked the opening scene of Monkey Business, which I love and find beautiful, but I do think if without the restraint of having to go chronologically, I suspect there's a strong chance we all might have chosen this as the first scene of a Marx Brothers compilation movie, because it does introduce them in such an iconic and hilarious way. But even coming in the middle of this mix, I still just love it. The brief scene with the captain and the first mate announcing that there are 4 stowaways, and then that slow pan into the 4 barrels. As Adamson and others have pointed out, the actual jokes in this scene are not that strong. It's not the best, most sparkling Marx Brothers dialogue we've ever heard, but the impact of them popping out of those barrels, specifically labeled kippered herring, which seems to me like a nice nod to their origins. I love it. So that's my choice.
You know, I'd so love that scene because it's so perfect and so iconic in the way it's set up. But the jokes it's just too corny for me. I can't take the vaudevilleness of it all. It just doesn't work for me. I just wanted the material to be better.
No surprise that I went for the passports, but I went for the passports in part for the same reason that Bob didn't, which is that we had already had a glimpse of them at the start. I thought that actually would add to it, that they would then do that again later on in the film, almost like an intended running joke.
So, you're right. I think I would have put it in had the gag evolved a little bit, maybe with a different singer or some twist on it, but it was basically the same thing. So I passed.
Yeah. I mean, obviously I was very aware of that, but I would have I would have definitely wanted that scene in otherwise, and I did toss that around and decided in the end that it was not a problem, and maybe even an asset in that it would get a laugh straight away just at hearing that song again. Other than that, I think it should go in for all the reasons that I've always hailed it as one of, if not the favourite of all their routines for me, which is that they each are seen to best advantage. I think probably never better advantage as far as Zeppo is concerned. But there's also, and obviously we'd go right from Zeppo finding the passport right through to the chaos with in the passport line. It's physical. It's also slightly musical. And it's got that lovely team spirit in it. And one of the things I think that is hardest to preserve in a compilation like this is that feeling of team spirit, which tends to come at ephemeral moments and at transitions between scenes and things. But this is a full scene, where they are a united front against the world. Bob.
Yeah, I just want to backtrack for a minute and talk about the House That Shadows Built scene, since we skipped over it a bit.
Sure.
Every time I see it, I am just so blown away by how integrated Zeppo is into the team there. He just really feels like he's one of the Marx Brothers. And, it's just a shame we never saw that integration at any other point in their career. It's so wonderful near the end when they're all riffing and he breaks out in the mammy. I mean, he has a real persona and a real personality and is real cocky here. And I just wish we would have seen that, again sometime. Now, as to my pick here for Monkey Business, this was the toughest one for me because as much as I love the film, there's so many great gags and moments and exchanges. To me, there aren't really a lot of great scenes from beginning to end. The laughs are in, little fits, little bunches, but they're not great end-to-end scenes, at least from my perspective. So what I've done here is I've actually just taken a chunk on the deck. When Groucho and Zeppo are encountering the Briggs arguing, your turn, all that stuff. And then leading up to where Groucho pitches himself as the bodyguard to Joe Helton.
Now, there are two fellas trying to attack you, aren't there? And there are two fellas trying to defend you. Now, that's 50% waste. Now, why can't you be attacked by your own bodyguards? Your life will be saved, and that's 100% waste. Now, what do you got? You still got me, and I'll attack you for nothing.
Say, what are you getting at?
I anticipated that question. How does an army travel? On its stomach. How do you travel? On a ship. Of course, you're saving your stomach. Now, that same common sense...
I don't think you realize...
Oh, I realize it's a penny here and a penny there, but look at me. I've worked myself up from nothing to a state of extreme poverty. Now, what do you say?
I'll tell you what I say. I say...
All right, then it's all settled. I'm to be your new bodyguard. In case I'm going to attack you, I'll have to be there to defend you, too. Now, let me know when you want to be attacked, and I'll be there 10 minutes later to defend you.
And in the middle, we get a nice bit of Harpo chasing a couple of women around the deck. So that's my choice. A nice chunk of Monkey Business.
And it's interesting as well, isn't it? I think a lot of people might have said, well, it's somewhere around in this film, we're going to have a classic moment of just Harpo doing what Harpo does, and they would leap to the Punch and Judy scene. But I think we're quite unusual in that if I remember rightly, we're all not particularly in love with that scene.
Yeah, that's actually a good example of what I was talking about before. There are a lot of good laughs in the scene, but I wouldn't call it a great scene from beginning to end.
Yeah, it has some very funny things in it, and Harpo's performance is as wonderful as always. But overall, as a scene, its impact is sort of, I find it a little loud and grating, and the unexplained aspects of it interfere more than they sometimes do. Questioning, like, where's the puppeteer? Where's the other puppeteer? And all those things. Yeah, they seem to get in the way for me in that scene in a way that they often don't.
My original choice for this and what I almost went with was the Too Many Snoops scene.
That's a scene.
But, I have a sort of the same issue with this that I do with the Tootsie Frutti ice cream scene, and that it's really great the first time you see it to watch it unfold. But I'm not sure it really holds up to repeated viewings. Mm-hmm. And I guess that shouldn't really matter in a compilation like this, which is basically going towards the novice fan. But I don't know, maybe the scene has lost a bit of its luster for me. I enjoy it, but I can't really sell it as a classic.
Okay, Horse Feathers is one of the ones that I changed my mind about the most. My first feeling was to do something quite surprising, perhaps, and go for Zeppo singing Everyone Says I Love You, segueing into Harpo's harp version of it. I decided originally to do that because obviously at some point I wanted a Harpo moment on the harp, and also I thought this was going to be kind of the make or break chance to get some Zeppo in. But then with the Shadows built and with the passports, I thought actually, Zeppo's probably getting a fairer shot in this compilation than he does in any single Marx Brothers movie. So I relieved myself of the need to look out for him, to give him some extra help. And then it was around about this point when I'd done a couple more. I realized that in actual fact there was far less Groucho than I would have realized, would have thought, and certainly would have wanted. And I wanted a Groucho song. I knew that much. And I didn't really want Lydia, and I knew I wouldn't get very far pitching Sing While You Sell. And Hello, I Must Be Going had gone. Animal Crackers had gone. So I went for the opening scene with Whatever It Is, I'm Against It.
Your proposition may be good, but let's have one thing understood. Whatever it is, I'm against it. And even when you've changed it or condensed it, I'm against it. I'm opposed to it. On general principles, I'm opposed to it. He's opposed to it. In fact, he's opposed to it.
Bob.
Well, actually, this was one of my easier choices. And I've picked something here that I don't think necessarily is the best scene in the film, but it's certainly my favorite. And it's Chico's singing lesson with Thelma Todd, with Groucho in the peanut gallery giving wisecracks. We get the great nonsense song Chico sings. It's pretty much the one time he sang. I wish he would have done it a lot more.
Everyone says I love you. The great big mosquito when he stings you. The fly when he gets stuck on the fly paper too says I love you. Every time the cow says moo, she's a making the bull feel very happy too. And the rooster when he holler cock-a-doodly-doodly-doo says I love you. Christopher Colombo, he write the Queen of Spain a very nice little note. And he's right all over you, baby, and then he get himself a great big boat. He's a wiser guy, what do you think Colombo do? When he's come here in 1492, he say to Pocahontas, atcha-fatcha-atcha-goo. That means, you little son of a gun, I love you.
And, he has great chemistry with Thelma. They're tickling each other. It's just a wonderful scene. I just love it so much. And, you're killing two birds with one stone here, actually, because you get a nice Chico piano solo at the end. So this was an easy choice for me.
And it's my list, actually, now you say that, doesn't have Thelma in it, which, would have been possibly much more permissible a few years ago than now. I think her stock has risen massively, as the Dumont stand-in in those two films, and I think maybe there would be some controversy about a film a compilation that didn't make room for her anywhere. So that is a persuasive choice. Noah?
Well, my list is very Groucho heavy. I ran afoul of exactly the problem you mentioned earlier, Matthew. And for that reason only, I did not choose the same scene you did. The opening scene with Groucho's kind of two songs in one, that was my first thought. And I do notice my list does not have a Groucho singing appearance in it. I chose the speakeasy scene in Horse Feathers, beginning with the Groucho and Chico password piece, which I think is top drawer, and then going into the scene set inside the speakeasy, where particularly Harpo has so many wonderful gags, and that scene is a real triumph for Harpo.
Hey, what'll you have?
You take a scotch.
Right.
Cut the cards.
I think it really conjures up the feeling of the early Marx Brothers films too, very well. The kind of the disordered chaos of that speakeasy scene, the location that isn't very convincingly realistic. It's just the Marx Brothers living in a world engineered to set them up for gags. And I think it typifies the Paramount messiness too. So that's my choice, the speakeasy scene in Horse Feathers.
Let me just interject here that I might have gone for the Connie Bailey apartment scene had it existed in its full original glory, but I couldn't even consider that. It's just this black hole every time I watch the film.
Well, it would be a good chance to slip your version in.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Did any of you notice that the job of selecting a chunk, a sketch, was easy enough for the first two, is not so easy for the remaining Paramounts, and then gets easy again at MGM when they suddenly go back to, partly I suppose because of the way it was written, the way the films were written, and in some cases roadshowed, that the MGMs go back to chunks almost like Broadway plays in the way that the first two are, but Monkey Business, Horse Feathers, and Duck Soup are much more cinematically structured, and it's harder to pull a chunk out.
Yeah, it's interesting how so many great moments we think of from Horse Feathers and actually Duck Soup too are actually just short moments, like 30, 40 seconds, like the speakeasy door.
Yeah.
It's a real short scene.
Which is certainly a problem that comes to light with my choice for Duck Soup. But we'll start with you, Bob.
Oh, Noah's already walked out, and Matthew might walk out by the time. There's so many great scenes so many great scenes to choose from. Ciccolini and Pinky reporting the Trentino. I mean, I just love that. But I love everything with Edgar Kennedy, and I know that's going to upset some people. And Duck Soup has my favorite finale of any of their films. But in the end, I would be doing fandom a disservice if I didn't give the people what they want, and that is to go with the mirror scene and what leads up to it. I'm going to start with, Margaret Dumont calling Groucho and them all disguising themselves as Groucho, and ending with the mirror scene. I just think you have to go there. I think anybody who has seen Duck Soup in front with an audience knows that that's going to get the biggest laugh.
Yeah.
Now let me ask you guys this: do you think Zeppo felt particularly left out since he was the one most capable of imitating Groucho, that they didn't even find a part for him in this scene?
Never thought of that, but yes. Yeah. But yes, I mean, he could have been somewhere involved in that scene, in that house, and then, Chico could have come on from the right and he could have come on from the left, couldn't he? No?
Well, I also chose the mirror scene. I think what this tells us more than anything, Matthew, is that your two co-hosts are secure. We know you love us. And we feel like we can make this choice without fracturing the relationship among the hosts here. Yeah, I've been all over the map on the mirror scene, really. From in the early days of loving the Marx Brothers, I went along with the general opinions about it being brilliant. Then exposed to your dissenting opinion, Matthew, I reevaluated it. It did slip a few notches, in my estimation, because of your very cogent criticisms of it. But I've sort of come back around on it. And I think, although it is undeniably true that it's a very poor sample if you're trying to convey to someone what the Marx Brothers are all about. It is indeed uncharacteristic of them. But it is so impressive. It is genuinely funny. I've never seen it not reduce an audience to tears. And it's got so many good ideas in it. In preparing for this episode, I watched a few of the other versions of that routine that other comedians have done. And it's interesting to compare them. The Marx Brothers, or in this case, Groucho and Harpo, you could make an argument that they're not as technically proficient as some of the others, Chaplin and Rene Clair, who are these, balletic physical clowns. And yet the Marx Brothers version seems so much more complex and so much more advanced because of the great ideas in it. I know some of those ideas might have come from McCary. But, Groucho dropping his hat and Harpo handing it, vice versa, Harpo dropping his hat and Groucho handing it to him. The way it becomes, again, it's a point that Adamson made better than anybody. that by the end of that scene, the trick has become, what could Harpo possibly do that would not make Groucho think he was his mirror image?
Yeah.
Did you mean Renee Claire there or Max Linder?
Oh, yeah, absolutely right. Max Linder.
Yeah, well, this one ended up being my most sort of uncomfortably tactical obligation choice. Originally, I just went for my favourite, which was it was a choice between Groucho and Zeppo and Take Up the Tax, or Chico and Harpo and Trentino, and I went for Trentino because it was longer and because there were more good jokes in it. But actually, when I looked at the finished list, there was a lot of Harpo and Chico, about more than I was expecting, not as much Groucho. So I changed my mind on that, and then for a long time, you're going to have to sit down and strap yourself in here. But I also had the mirror down as my choice. Basically for the reasons that you've just given. One, that everybody loves it. It's a certain crowd pleaser, and far be it from me to rain on anyone's enjoyment by grumbling in the corner. About
Really far be it?
Well, slightly far be it. But also because, it is absolutely true, and I've never denied that they do transfigure it with things that only they would do, specifically, giving the game away unambiguously, but continuing as if it was just now at this point fun for both of them when they swap hats, when they switch places in the mirror, they actually turn around, stuff like that. And then obviously that strange kind of louche confidence with which Chico strolls on at the end, thinking I might be able to help out here, is kind of the vibe you get from him. So I was happy to swallow my pride and go with that. And then I just realized that apart from a little bit in Animal Crackers, I hadn't got any good Groucho and Dumont. So for that reason only, I substituted their first scene, the dialogue between Groucho and Dumont when Groucho arrives.
The future of Fredonia rests on you. Promise me you'll follow in the footsteps of my husband.
How do you like that? I haven't been on the job 5 minutes, and already she's making advances to me. Not that I care, but where is your husband?
Why, he's dead.
I'll bet he's just using that as an excuse.
I was with him till the very end.
No wonder he passed away.
I held him in my arms and kissed him.
Oh, I see. Then it was murder. Will you marry me? Did he leave you any money? Answer the second question first.
He left me his entire fortune.
Is that so? Can't you see what I'm trying to tell you? I love you.
Okay, so at this point then, we have a significant change of mood, which signifies the fact that we now move from Paramount to MGM and to A Night at the Opera, and to a film that is more lavish than anything they'd done before. I wondered if maybe there should be some sort of indication of that here in the choice, but I found in the end that made it too hard, and so I didn't. But I wonder if you felt the same thing and felt the same kind of obligation. So let's start with you, Noah.
I went with the contract scene. It's maybe the easiest and most obvious choice, but it's excellent. I think it's among the 2 or 3 best Groucho Chico encounters anyway. And also for this kind of film, which might be a good way to introduce people to the Marx Brothers, the contract scene seems to me an excellent entry point, because it has all the things that make the Marx Brothers special, but at the same time, it plays very much as a comedy scene, a comedy routine. It operates on its own premise. It has its own logic and illogic. And of course, both performances are flawless.
The party of the second part should be known in this contract as the party of the second part.
Well, I don't know about that.
Now what's the matter?
I don't like the second party either.
Well, you should have come to the first party. We didn't get home till around 4 a.m. I was blind for 3 days.
Hey, look. Why can't the first part of the second party be the second part of the first party? Then you got something.
Well, look, rather than go through all that again, what do you say?
Fine.
I originally went for the contract scene as well. I changed my mind only when I did some reordering and ended up putting in wire duck for the coconuts. But if that comes out, then I think the case for changing my mind and going back to the contract scene for opera becomes possibly inarguable. I did consider the crowded stateroom, which I think many people would think would be an absolute shoe in. I didn't think it was quite strong enough to justify that. For a long time, I thought it might be nice, because we're at this kind of halfway point, to have something that was very elaborate and to kind of come in with a bang, and maybe, although we're only halfway through the movie, go with some of the opera destruction at the end, particularly the very early stages where it first goes into Take Me Out to the Ball Game, and Groucho comes in selling peanuts, and then going right through to Harpo destroying the opera. I knew that might create a problem with anticlimax afterwards, but I thought at this halfway point it would be good. I changed my mind for probably a too pedantic reason, which is that although that scene is easy to get and extremely funny without any backstory, in a sense, it would be deceiving the audience to not have backstory, although it doesn't really matter, and you can certainly get the point of what they're doing. To present it seeming as if they were doing it for no reason at all, although quite possibly making it funnier, it wouldn't be playing fair by the film, I thought. So for that possibly absurdly tail-chasing reason, I ruled it out, and in the end I went for the aviator's speech, because it's good Harpo, it's good Chico, and visually it's just interesting because they've got those silly beards on and funny uniforms. So visually it's a kind of a change of pace, and I also knew, or thought I knew, that there wasn't going to be a lot of Chico happening from here on. So, for those incredibly convoluted reasons, I went for the aviator's speech.
So now I tell you how we fly to America. The first time we started, we get a halfway across when we run out of gasoline, and we got to go back. Then I take twice as much gasoline. This time we were just about to land, maybe 3 feet. Well, what do you think? We run out of gasoline again. And the back we go again and get more gas. This time I take plenty gas. Well, we get halfway over. When what do you think happened? We forgot the airplane.
Bob.
Well, I'm going to throw a curveball here, and I'm going with the scene in the dressing room where Harpo gets the crap beat out of him. Because no, I'm not doing that. No. Once again, I can't fathom putting together a film like this and not including the stateroom scene. But I'm going to do it with the caveat that you have to start it earlier. You can't just do it when people start piling in. You have to start. I'm starting it when Groucho comes to the cabin and opens up his trunk and sees Harpo sleeping in there, and the guys are in there, and then leading to the ordering of the food, because all that momentum is leading to what makes the stateroom scene so great when everybody starts crowding in. Somebody has it in the book. Was it you, Matthew, or Adamson, or somebody does? The people are already laughing when that stateroom scene is beginning, when people are starting to crowd in there. So you can't just start it there. You have to lead into it. And I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this film without putting the manicurist in there. If you guys know anything about me, okay? Jesus.
You can have the mirror or the stateroom. You're not having both.
Yeah. And I'm even insulted that you guys even asked me what scene I put in. Okay.
or that we believed you when you said you were going to go for Harpo having the crap beaten out of him. we both went, interesting choice, Bob.
I mean,
okay.
he thought.
Go on.
I was going to mention that Bob thought it was Sunday today. So what? Our listeners don't know that.
It's true. Yeah, this is a Wednesday. Bob thought it was Sunday. All bets are off. And hey, as this for a segue, speaking of bets, we're off to the races. This is again one of those films where the choice is so obvious. It had to be the mirror, it had to be the stateroom, and it has to be Tootsie Frutti ice cream. But I just don't like it all that much. And it is also very, very long. I think at this point in the film, you're probably wanting to pick up the pace a bit, and I was surprised at how measured that scene is, which isn't a bad thing. I mean, for MGM, it's a good thing. It's a coconuts, animal crackers type thing, but it's very obviously something that has been honed on in front of live audiences, and it has a live audience pace. And it wasn't a big favourite of mine, and so I went for Margaret Dumont's Examination because it's very physical. Because I hadn't included the very physical moment from scene from Night at the Opera, I went for a wordy one there. So I thought, okay, let's have a bit of knockabout. The scene I like the most in the film, which is Groucho phoning the Florida Medical Board, I thought would seem a little bit orphaned without its context. But the examination, although we don't know the context, I think comes across much easier. Again, all three of them are very funny. There's some very good repetition humor, which I love, with the washing of the hands. We get a bit more Margaret Dumont, and also we get Sig Ruman. And I think I was very, very naughty to not include Thelma Todd. So I'm not going to make the same mistake again and not include Sig Ruman. So I went for Margaret Dumont's Examination. Bob?
Well, the last two films I've been talking about how you got to give the people what they want. Well, I'm changing my tune here because I'm not going with the Tootsie Frutti, which is probably what people want, but I'm not letting them have that. I'm going to go with the Groucho's Date with Flo and the dinner and the interruptions in the wallpapering. I just think it's a little by the book comedy scene, but I just think it's well done. Great energy. I really couldn't find anything else in the film that I liked more. So I'm going with that. So
I think you went for that basically for the same reasons then that I went for the Examination, that it's it's very physical. There's lots of energy in it. Just given the choice, I think there's more kind of inventiveness in the Examination. I do like the other scene. I don't have a problem with it, but I just think, there are other people who can throw wallpaper paste about, and we don't really need to see that. I mean, yeah, admittedly, Harpo's bucket is on his head like a hat. That's good. Don't get me wrong. But all the same,
Yeah, but that's just that's just the end of the scene. It's not a big part of it.
Sure,
it goes on quite a while. There's a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, when they come in like detectives, and Harpo's got the deerstalker on and that. Yeah, no, that's a fair point.
And Groucho's thank yous.
Yeah. Yeah, and the tin of soup and all that. Yeah.
Actually, I think this full scene is a little underappreciated. Perhaps because it comes so late in a pretty long film, and people are still waking up after the water carnival scene, so maybe it doesn't get the full attention it deserves.
Yep.
I found A Day at the Races one of the harder movies to pick a scene from, which is surprising, or was surprising to me anyhow, partly because I consider it, and I think most consider it, a fairly middling Marx Brothers movie, or at least not so crammed with comic gold that it should be the most difficult choice on this list. But it was tough. It seemed to me that I wasn't going to choose Tootsie Frutti, but I deliberated a lot among the Groucho Florida Medical Board phone call, the Harpo Examination, the Dumont Examination, and the Date with Flo. And at various times, I had all of those on my list. I wound up landing on the Groucho switchboard scene, simply because compared to those others, I think it is the most comedically brilliant, and it's the one that will most reliably make me laugh out loud after hundreds of viewings. And it is, although in some ways uncharacteristic, definitely a virtuoso performance for Groucho. But that's a hard choice to make, Day at the Races. I did think that the Date with Flo, although in some ways it is the Day at the Races version of the running in and out of rooms scene that pops up in so many of their films, measured against the other versions of that scene, it loses something. It doesn't really have any kind of structure or momentum pulling you through the scene the way the dogs pull Harpo through the scene. I
certainly agree with everything you say about that phone call scene. You said it was maybe not particularly the most representative, but it's interesting, isn't it? Because it is certainly my favourite scene in the film.
Yeah.
It's probably the least representative scene of the film. It's the one that is most that sits most uncomfortably in the structure of A Day at the Races, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which kind of says something, I think, about the Thalberg rules. That this sequence where Groucho, the only sequence where Groucho is completely letting his instincts override his common sense, should be such a standout favorite.
Yeah, it's very like the mirror routine and other things in the post Paramount Marx career. It's a scene that could have been played by another comedian.
Could have been W.C. Fields.
Yeah, Fields could have done it, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a very specific tactic Groucho is using to address this situation about his credentials. As has often been pointed out by you and others, Matthew, the Groucho, it's self-defeating. I mean, he doesn't simply give himself a positive recommendation and move on with the plot. And
Groucho could have, the film could have ended there. He could have, he could have got exactly what he needed and everything would have been sorted out.
But also, as with the mirror scene, it does have these flourishes to it that couldn't have come from anywhere else. And, Groucho not bothering to insult Whitmore the way he normally would, or the way he does just in the preceding scenes in the movie, that is what feels uncharacteristic. On the other hand, that Colonel Hawkins character, that is one of the 5 or 6 funny voice or dialect tricks in the Groucho briefcase, and I love hearing him do that.
Rigging apartment? Colonel Hawkins talking.
Colonel Hawkins, did you get a wire from me regarding Dr. Hackenbush?
I'm sorry, sir, but there's a hurricane blowing down here, and you'll have to talk a little louder. Woo! It's certainly the windiest day we ever did have.
Okay, so we come now to room service and to a prediction, which is that despite our differences up until now, and without me having the smallest tip off as to what Bob and Noah have chosen, I'm going to put my reputation on the line here and say that we've probably all chosen the same bit from room service. So let's start with Bob.
Yeah, I wish I had a more clever approach to this, but the only scene in this film that really feels like a Marx Brothers scene, in context and out of context, is them devouring that dinner and Harpo wolfing those potatoes down. There are other funny moments, but nothing else really feels like a Marx Brothers scene, at least out of context, or would work in this type of compilation film.
Mm-hmm. Noah, surprise me and tell me you haven't chosen the same bit.
Not only would I love to be able to do that, I struggled to. I looked at room service. I didn't rewatch the whole movie, but I went through it. I tried very hard to develop an argument for what we might call the funeral scene, which I thought was the only other possible candidate. But looking at it, it just doesn't, outside the context of the plot, it doesn't have any comic weight to it, really. And truthfully, even in the context of the plot, it doesn't have that much. So yeah, it's the eating scene. Although I have to say, as our room service episode of this podcast demonstrates, I think we all have a slightly higher opinion of room service than popular opinion. It is almost impossible to take anything out of it and hold it up as an example of the Marx Brothers' work, as we discovered when we did our Groucho Chico episode and found there wasn't even like a 2-minute section of room service with them talking to each other that we could nominally include. So I don't even think the eating scene is a hilarious, perfect Marx Brothers gold out of context, but it's the only possible choice.
Well, there is one other possible choice, but I'm glad that neither of you went for it, which is the
turkey. Yeah.
That is at least a possible choice. But no, I would you believe it? I didn't go for the turkey. I like room service a lot more than most people do, and there are lots and lots of parts of it that I enjoy a lot. But context is everything, and it is impossible to convey, I think, the epithet scene, or the funeral at the end, particularly the bit at the end where Harpo's corpse comes on in the middle of the play. I think that's a lovely, rousing ending. But there's just no way in an extract to get that across. So, yep, I'm afraid I also went for the eating scene. What I hoped, and this is the sort of thing I think that Bob probably thinks about more than the rest of us per se. What I really hoped was that I could have chosen a scene from Races that ended with some good music that I would then carry over to just a few seconds of that eating scene, still with the music from the previous scene going on, because it doesn't really, even that scene doesn't really deserve to be, it's more of an interlude, I think, between Races and Circus. So not even the whole scene, not the whole preamble, just the absolute bare minimum of that meal coming in and them all devouring it. Yeah.
Well, you bring up a good question here about the transitions between these scenes. I mean, do you envision like a narrator, like maybe setting up some of these scenes? Who would your narrator be?
I didn't envision a narrator because I always think of the ones in those 1960s films, which
yeah.
Although they have a certain period charm, are not really best serving the material, I think.
Right.
But of course that doesn't mean that these days we couldn't find someone a bit better, me or someone like that, to do it. But no, I must admit, I hadn't thought in terms of narrator. No, I thought of just a seamless patchwork of material. Did you have any thoughts on that, no?
I didn't. It actually hadn't even occurred to me when I was making my list of the idea of imposing narration or continuity.
I just thought that some of them might need like a little setup, like here Chico and Harpo want to break up this date with Flo, setting up what's going on.
Yeah.
I mean, that would throw open a lot of the things I rejected, would again become candidates for inclusion if we had that license. I was very much working without it. Okay, so off to the circus and Noah.
Well, I found myself cheating a little bit toward the end of my list, where the films start to get much less funny, and it's much harder to extract a scene and hail it as worthy of inclusion. I heavily favored the musical performances, which, after all, especially the instrumentals from Harpo and Chico, there mostly isn't a drop off in quality with the later films. So you're going to hear a lot of this from me for the rest of this list.
Yeah.
My choice for At the Circus is Chico's piano solo. It's not his greatest solo as a standalone piece, but it's a perfectly charming demonstration of his abilities at the keyboard. And I didn't want to sacrifice any comedy scenes to a piano solo in any of the earlier films, although I did come close to choosing the Animal Crackers salon scene, as you did, Matthew. So that's my choice, but in some ways my choice here was not to make a choice.
It is sort of noticeable, isn't it, that in the first ones we're kind of worrying about what we can bear to leave out, and now we're kind of worrying about what we can bear to leave in. But that would be the kind of tactical choice I would be thinking about roundabout now, if it wasn't for the fact that I'd managed to sneak Chico in Animal Crackers. I considered the Groucho and Margaret Dumont scene before the circus begins, another cup of coffee, and where she gets licked by the giraffe and so on. But in the end, I thought, the strongman's cabin scene really is good, and I've said so many times that you could sneak it into a compilation of Paramount material and get away with it in a way that you probably couldn't with any other MGM scene. You could literally just deceive people into thinking it was a Paramount scene. So there was that, and B, it just seemed like a waste to get to At the Circus and leave out the one scene that really stood out as wildly different. So at that point I went back and took out things like the Trentino consultation from Duck Soup and so on, because I'd envisaged not much Chico Harpo fun to come, and I surrendered to the inevitable, and I went for Chico and Harpo searching the strongman's cabin, because it's wonderful.
Yes, that's exactly how I approached it. I mean, I went to this film pretty early on and said, I have to use this scene here. That means I'm not going to use the Trentino with Ciccolini and Pinky scene. I'm not going to use the bridge scene from Animal Crackers, which I was tempted to use. This was going to be the one Chico Harpo scene. And, it was just really a no-brainer for me. Although at one point I was a little tempted. Maybe I should, people are going to be shocked here. Maybe I should use Lydia here. If I'm going to put musical performances by the other brothers, I got to have a Groucho vocal. And I'm thinking maybe, even though I'm not a big fan of it, I was thinking maybe I should do it. But then I sobered up and left it with my original choice.
I toyed with it too. Did you consider Lydia, Matthew?
I did, yeah, but that was when I hit on, that decision that I wasn't going to include something for the sake of it unless it was a really good example.
How about this? We'll use Lydia over the closing credits of the film. Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. So it was at that point that I thought, right, I really do need to go back and see if I can get a good Groucho song in, and if I couldn't, then yes, I would have bitten the bullet and gone for Lydia. But because I managed to fit whatever it is I'm against it in, I was relieved to not have to put it in. Not that I have anything strongly against it. It's it's a very funny, well written song. We've been over this territory a lot, but I just wouldn't want that to represent Groucho singing, because it isn't. It is significantly unlike the other Groucho songs. It's just a cute, funny song, and all of his other songs really, or certainly prior to this, have some kind of bite to them that one doesn't. So I was glad to find room for whatever it is I'm against it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Go West. Now, this is a film that is so crowded with gems that it's very, very difficult to know which you can possibly bear to leave out. If we're going by the kind of give the people what they want, then I guess the first scene is the obvious choice. And I suspect I'm being very pedantic for not choosing it. I mean, it is a well-written, well-performed comedy scene. It gets all three brothers on the screen. You're almost tempted to say, what's not to like? And my answer to that question is the scene. I just don't dig it. It probably should be there. That probably should be the choice. If either of you have chosen that, I will certainly give way. But I didn't in the end. I considered Riding the Range for a while. I thought we hadn't had a song for a bit, and it's quite sweet. But there are so many great songs that I hadn't included. I considered the cigar scene, which I know is a very controversial one. In the end, I surprised myself, partly because I wanted to get Go West sort of out of the way fairly quickly, and I didn't want to have it represented by a really big moment. So I went for the short section that probably makes me smile the most. And I will have my membership of the Marx Brothers Appreciation Society cancelled for this, but it's Where We Girls was born, and Louisiana.
A toast to Where We Girls was born, South Carolina.
South Carolina.
Mississippi.
Mississippi.
Louisiana.
Louisiana. Hey, I thought these girls were sisters.
They are, but their mother lived in a trailer.
Bob.
Okay, I got to pick something here. A lot of people like the finale, but I've never liked that, even as a kid. I just didn't get it.
I didn't even consider that.
The silent comedians did that stuff so much better. I don't understand why anybody likes that. There are a few things I like in the film. I like Chico and Groucho getting drunk, but I guess I'm going to go with the opening. It's a nice traditional comedy scene. The casual fan seems to like it, and it's well done. So why not? I mean, unless you're going to let me go with the Copacabana Go West number, maybe I can fool people into thinking it's from this film.
Well, you theoretically could, but I don't really like that much either, to be honest. I'm not sure it's all that great, really. I think we're really just so grateful for it in that film.
Yeah.
No.
I seriously considered riding the range for the reasons that you cite, Matthew. I do enjoy that number, and I guess I probably enjoy it more than any other, extended kind of minutes-long piece of Go West. It has really almost nothing to do with the Marx Brothers, and it doesn't even try to be funny. But it's pleasant and charming and unusual, and it has all three Marx Brothers in it performing a song together, and that's nice. And
it looks very pretty, doesn't it? It's not very often that you see them in natural light.
Very true.
They're in waning natural light there, and it does look very nice.
Yeah, I kind of like it, but just for the reason you cite, Matthew, I thought, well, if I'm not including Hooray for Captain Spaulding, or I'm against it, or the laws of my administration, I really can't justify it. Or even Lydia, I really can't put Riding the Range in this compilation. Then I thought, well, what about one line? If it's just one line, does that count as a scene? I do like it. I do like when Groucho says, "Time wounds all heals." But I thought, that's not enough. It has to be at least an exchange, at least two lines to count as a scene. So I went with the opening. I agree with everything you say, Matthew. It doesn't stand out to me as a Marx Brothers masterpiece, nor does it particularly make me laugh, but it is, after all, a comedy scene.
Well, okay.
I was thinking about using the end title, but I'm not sure.
Yes, at that point, yeah, definitely. Right, yes. So, Big Store and Bob.
This actually was pretty easy for me. I like the film well enough. It's pleasant. It's humorous. I don't think it's great. I don't find any scene great. So what I needed to find was something unique. And there is one unique scene in the film, and it's Harpo's harp solo. And I needed a harp solo, so that was my choice, and that's all I have to say about it.
Yeah, and Noah?
I chose the piano duet from The Big Store, partly because it's so charming and funny. It always puts a smile on my face. Just the sight of Harpo and Chico together at the keyboard, that's lovely. It reminds me of their vaudeville days. And since I already have a Chico piano solo in this list, I chose his solo from At the Circus. So it's not a problem that Harpo is kind of impinging on Chico's specialty here.
Well, now you've made me feel like a moron for saying there was only one unique scene in the film. I probably should have chosen that one, but I guess I needed a harp solo anyhow. So
this is the one that I felt the most guilty about, because this is the one where I most went against my rule of not including something because it should be there for the sake of it, when there are much better examples of it elsewhere. Before I had modified Horse Feathers and gone with whatever it is I'm against it, I did have Sing While You Sell down as my first choice. I knew that people would never stand for it, that there would be mass walkouts in the cinema at that point, that all the preview cards would come back saying, what Sing While You Sell, are you people insane? This film deserves to die. So I changed my mind. And then I'm afraid it did occur to me that I hadn't accommodated a harp solo anywhere else. So even though I don't like it very much, I don't really like seeing him in that costume and mugging to those mirrors. We do have to have a harp solo. There won't be any more coming up. I haven't allowed for one before, so I'm afraid I did also go for Harpo's harp solo there. And again, at least visually, it does break the film up a bit. It's something a bit different. But we would have to cut before the end when he discovers it's a dream.
What? Or a nightmare.
Is that a deal breaker?
Well, I like it too, but it's not like I stayed awake through the whole thing.
Night in Casablanca and Noah.
Yes. Night in Casablanca. There's some interesting choices here. I thought about this one at some length before landing on what I think most people probably would cite as their favorite scene. And it was an example of one on this list that I chose just because I do think it's truly the strongest. It's Groucho and the Smythes in the lobby of the hotel. That's an excellent scene, and I think it would fit, just as you say that the strongman's room in Circus would fit right into one of the Paramounts. Groucho and the Smythes, that really could be Coconuts. I think it's Paramount strong, it's fast, it's funny, and for me, a fairly easy choice, although I do really like the in and out of rooms scene in Night in Casablanca. Groucho attempting a seduction and being interrupted by Harpo and Chico. They pull that off really well in this film. But not particularly narrowly. I went with the Smythes.
Mr. Smythe? Or Smith? This is a family hotel, and I suggest you take your business elsewhere.
Sir, this lady is my wife. You should be ashamed.
If this lady is your wife, you should be ashamed.
You'll hear from me.
Do that, even if it's only a postcard.
Sir, my attorneys will be here in the morning.
Yeah, well, they won't get a room either unless they got a marriage license.
And I think even as I nominate a different one, I am coming round to that actually as the most likely answer. I mean, I think I went into this thinking that I was naturally going to choose a lot of verbal stuff over visual stuff, and wherever possible, I should maybe slightly favour the visual. And in actual fact, I wonder if I've maybe gone too far in that direction, and the Smythes after that after the harp solo is just what we need here. Instead, I did go visual, and bearing in mind that I had turned down the stateroom and I turned down the adjoining rooms in Coconuts, I went for the vanishing ballroom. Groucho trying to dance on a ballroom that is rapidly being eaten up by tables with Chico and Harpo, which I think is probably their last really funny, visual comic idea, and a scene that I always enjoy very much, but not a scene that tends to come to mind much. It's not an enshrined classic, but it's one that I find people always are slightly surprised by and enjoy. So I went with the Vanishing Ballroom, but I'm thinking about those Smythes now. Bob.
I ran into sort of the same situation here that I did in Monkey Business, and that I like bits and pieces more than I do entire scenes here. At one point I was thinking of using the taste tester scene in Groucho's office with the food. That sort of seemed like a nice self-contained scene. But in the end, I felt bad. I think, no, my favorite thing is with the Smythes in the lobby, and actually starting it a hair earlier when the scene starts with Groucho at the front desk, and he has a little exchange with somebody on the phone. So, it's short, it's sweet, but there's no need to not include something because it's not long enough, as my wife always says.
Right. So I'm thinking, I'm actually going to, in fact, I'm going to do something I've not done until now. I'm going to officially change my vote. So that's 3 for the Smythes. 3 votes for the Smythes. And now on to Love Happy, and what a profusion of riches. It's the last film. So, I mean, the finale is the only thing, really. I mean, if I didn't already have a harp solo, I might be very, very guiltily thinking, well, maybe go for the harp solo, but then who the hell wants to end a film on a harp solo? Even Go West doesn't quite end on the harp solo. It's way too late, but it doesn't quite do that. So I think we are limited really to the finale. I'd be interested to hear any kind of dissent from that. It needs a lot of editing. It needs to be cut right down. A lot of it is boring. Chico's not in it much, and Groucho is making a bit of an ass of himself getting into that funnel and vibrating and so on, isn't he? So I think we need to absolutely chop it down to the the bare minimum best stuff of Harpo going up and down on the horse and blowing out smoke and so on. It's still, it feels outrageous to me to have turned down the finale of Night at the Opera, to have turned down the finale of Duck Soup, in exchange for this. But I'm afraid this really was the point when I thought, what else is there? So a heavily edited version of the roof chase. All right. No.
I did choose the harp solo from Love Happy. I partly because I had such a hard time thinking of anything else to choose. The thing that floated through your head, Matthew, very much floated through mine too, which is, well, that would be a strange way to end this, to stick a harp solo at the end. But I came around to it partly out of desperation, partly out of looking at the actual harp solo in Love Happy, and it is actually quite lovely. It takes place in Central Park, in what is obviously visually Central Park. He's playing to an audience, to a woman, which is, there's a sweetness to that. And then I also started thinking, well, if the last Marx Brothers movie was in fact a kind of stillborn Harpo solo vehicle, and given the angelic or celestial associations we have with Harpo's harp playing, maybe that is the right way to end this. We've been on this comedy roller coaster all night, all these highlights from all of their greatest work. Maybe we should bring it down at the end, and go west too. Every rock bands tend to know you end a concert with a ballad. You end with something slow. Send everyone home, not raging with, a thrasher, but bring it down. Play them a lullaby at the end. Mm-hmm. So for those reasons, I went with the harp solo in Love Happy.
With the credits already rolling, or?
Well, that's interesting, yeah. Unless we go with Bob's notion of playing Lydia under the credits. But sure, you could run the credits over that harp solo. That would be a way to deal with it.
You've sold that to me to a degree that I wouldn't have previously thought possible. You make some very persuasive points there. And if Bob has something similar to say, I may well yield again. Bob?
Well, I got a two-prong answer.
Yeah.
First of all, when you say the Marx Brothers some Love Happy to somebody, what's the first thing they're going to think of?
That penguin.
Okay, the second thing. Second thing.
The mobile horse?
The Sadie Thompson number.
Close.
Sardines.
First thing people are going to think of is Marilyn Monroe.
Yes.
It's just as funny as anything in the film. Groucho is actually pretty decent in there.
Is there anything I can do for you? What a ridiculous statement.
Mr. Grunion, I want you to help me.
I have a little sand left. What seems to be the trouble?
Some men are following me.
Really? I can't understand why.
And obviously that doesn't feel like it's the end to this type of film. So I am breaking rank here. I am using my my leverage, and I am saying I am only doing this film if I can include one more scene. And since we started this compilation with something that's not part of their official 13 film canon, we're going to end with something that's not part of it either. And that is I'm jumping all the way to the Incredible Jewel Robbery. And I'm going to use two pieces from here, which I'm going to edit together. First of all, I'm going to show the actual jewel robbery itself, which actually has a couple little laughs. It's from the middle of the show. Harpo is dressed up as Groucho, and it's sort of funny when Chico comes in and tries arresting him and handcuffing him. We go from that, and then I'm going to go to the end with a police lineup with Groucho appearing, the duck coming down, and the end. I can't imagine a more fitting end to the Marxist career than that, unless we want to use some stuff of Deputy Sheriff with Chico forgetting a line. So I'm ending with the Incredible Jewel Robbery. Okay,
well,
with the end scene.
Seeing as I went out on a limb and have always argued for that being considered the 14th film, I may well have to yield to that. Are we allowed to do that, Noah?
You're the EP. You could do what you want.
It's your show, Matthew, but I think Bob makes an excellent point. That makes the whole thing bookended by semi-canonical short pieces.
And I think there is certainly something to be said for, I mean, and if the very, very end of Love Happy had been what it should have been, which is the three brothers on the roof leaving together, then I would have been content with that. But because it isn't, I think it would be nice to have them all together for that payoff, wouldn't it? And there aren't any other options. It is a shame Zeppo's not in the lineup. It is a shame that when the end comes down, it's not attached to a Marmon clamp. That would have been a good a good little cameo. But
or Frank Sinatra's fist.
A persuasive argument there from Bob Gassell. Right, I'm gonna go and. I'm not going to go anywhere. I'm going to sit here and draw up the final list. In the meantime, is there anything else, boys, that you wanted to throw in this time?
I had been thinking that if one were to sit down and actually watch this compilation film, if for example we knew a gifted film editor who might put it together, it would be very interesting to watch it with the chronological requirement, because we would see them age over the course of the evening. And that's something we normally take in stride. When you watch the older films, you might register in the early scenes like, oh yeah, they're getting along in years in this one. Mm-hmm. But then it sort of clicks into normalcy and you accept it. You don't think about that for the rest of the film. But it would be interesting to sit down and over the course of an hour or two, watch them go from those extremely youthful guys in their 40s and late 30s in Coconuts, all the way to 1949 and Love Happy. There might be an extra sort of moving aspect to that.
Obviously, if we were doing a documentary about the team, you'd have to put these scenes in chronological order. But in a compilation like this, you'd have to be freaking out of your mind to do it in order, because all the great stuff would be in the first half of the film. And you just can't do that. You'd want to end with like the rousing finale of Duck Soup or Night at the Opera. So, if we were doing the film the right way, we would not be doing it in chronological order, and we'd be picking different scenes from some of these films, and we'd have a much better product. And who knows, we might even forget to put something in from Go West at all. So, who knows?
Okay, right. We have the final running order, and I've tried to combine here selfless accommodation with blatant fascism. So right. So striking a happy medium between rolling over backwards and stamping down my boot. Coconuts we'll go for that opening. We'll go for them all coming in. Animal Crackers, I'm sticking with the soiree and Chico's piano solo. And I'm sticking with the passports for Monkey Business. And I'm sticking with whatever it is I'm against it for Horse Feathers. But here things take a turn. The mirror scene we're going to have for Duck Soup. The contract scene we're going to have for Night of the Opera, because I no longer have Wire Duck at the start, and we need some Groucho and Chico, so we're going to go for the contract scene. My most conciliatory gesture, as far as races is concerned, is it's a three-way tie. I really don't mind. It can be either the Dumont examination or the phone call or Flo. I'm happy for any of those. Let's go for eating, for room service. Let's go for the strongman's cabin for circus. I'm going to allow the opening scene of Go West. Why not? I'm going to stick with the harp solo for the big store. And then we will have a fast fade out that consists of the Smythes and Marilyn and the incredible jewel robbery. And there's our film.
Pretty good.
And I timed out my version of it. It's only like about an hour and 10 minutes, so it doesn't need to be particularly long.
With commercials, it'll be 90 minutes, on telly.
I didn't get a Groucho Chico scene in there. I felt, I guess.
So we've taken care of it for you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I have to say, I feel better about the resulting list that you've just delivered, Matthew, than I did about my list that I entered this conversation with. So our three minds did lead to I think a pretty good version.
It had to happen someday.
And I've decided I'm a narrator.
Ah,
Gene Kelly.
Matthew will not know. No.
I might surprise you.
Kristen Schaal.
Never heard of him.
Oh,
Okay.
her. Yeah, that's
Her. Never heard of her.
Yes.
she's a very funny comedian. But why Kristen Schaal, Bob?
I just find her eminently likable.
I do too.
And her voice makes you want to pay attention.
Yeah.
It has to be an attractive voice. I mean, if we're actually going to take this idea seriously, you have to imagine it being watched by somebody who doesn't know the person. So any association you have with them, visually or in terms of what they normally do, you have to take away and just listen to that voice. So if she's got a good voice, then I'll consider her. Tell her to send in a resume. And
the only other one I considered was Bill Hader.
Never heard of him.
Obviously, okay.
I thought an interesting choice might be John Turturro. He has this slight connection because of Brain Donors. He played the Groucho-like role in Brain Donors, though not in a Groucho voice. But he has a very good voice. He would make an excellent narrator, and he's a slightly offbeat sound. It's not a traditional Gary Owens kind of narrator voice.
My choice, I don't know if we'd get him, but is Jay Hopkins available?
Oh, of course.
Never heard of him.
Well, that was almost fun. Before we wrap up, is any other business?
Yeah, I got a couple of things. First of all, last month before we did our show, Bob Weedy told me that sales of his DVD would not be affected by the podcast, that he's tried promoting it before, but nothing has worked. But guess what? According to Bob, sales have exploded since we did the podcast with him. So that's good news. And I'm guessing sales of his iconic, directed by Robert B. Weedy T-shirt have also gone up. Well, they've gone up by at least one because I myself have bought one.
Which you're not wearing.
Well, I am. I was wearing it when we were supposed to record the other day, but you didn't show up, Matthew. So.
Good answer.
Also, if you haven't heard, there will be a new Blu-ray coming out this December with A Night in Casablanca. We know nothing else. We don't know anything about special features, if it's been restored, whether we're doing the commentary track. We have no further info on any of that, so don't ask. Maybe ask if you could find online, if you could find the company releasing it, and ask if we're doing the commentary track. Maybe they'll let you know.
Yeah, tell them that you will only buy it if we do, and if we don't, that you will boycott it and urge all other consumers to boycott it. Hey, you've got some news, haven't you, Noah?
I do. Members of the group are probably aware that I have recently begun making noise about this upcoming project called Home Again, the Marx Brothers and New York City. I assume many of our listeners will be aware of Fredonia Marxonia, which is an annual Marx Brothers festival held in the town of Fredonia, New York, on the campus of SUNY Fredonia, and at a beautiful venue called the 1891 Fredonia Opera House, which is also in that town. It's a beautiful little place in upstate New York. So this year I was supposed to again appear at the festival and be their featured speaker. But of course, like all other in-person events this year, it has been changed to a virtual festival. And so Cindy Yoakum, who is the reference librarian at SUNY Fredonia and runs the Marxonia Festival, she asked if I would put together a live streaming program in lieu of my in-person appearance. And of course, I was happy to do that. Among other things, it's available to everyone. You don't have to go to upstate New York to see it. So this will be a multimedia experience, live streaming for free on the evening of October 2nd, which is, of course, the 130th birthday of Groucho Marx. So there's information about this in the council group at my website, noahdiamond.com, and Fredonia Marxonia itself has a website, which you can find by Googling Fredonia Marxonia and get all the information. But it'll be a terrific time. I've particularly enjoyed over the last couple of months putting this piece together. It has tons of media in it, lots of sounds and film and new sequences. It's also led me, for the first time since the pandemic began, to go back to my old habits of walking around New York City and looking at things. And I've been filming and photographing some Marx-related locations around the city so that I'll be able to give you a kind of virtual tour. And it's included a couple of Marx Brothers landmarks that, believe it or not, I had never gotten around to visiting. So there's a couple of pieces of geography in this presentation that are as new to me as they might be to anyone else. Anyway, you can count on me to continue making noise about this between now and the first week in October. But I think it'll really be a good time. And if you care about the Marx Brothers, I encourage you to tune in. The evening of October 2nd, evening meaning New York time, 7 p.m. Eastern time. So please join us for that. And please, until then, tolerate my endless plugging of Home Again, the Marx Brothers, and New York City.
And I dare say we'll put some relevant links on the blog page itself.
Sounds good. Oh, I should also mention there are contributions from members of the council. There are some visual as well as audio elements in it that have been extracted from some members of our group and members of the larger Marx Brothers community. So it is also a collaborative project in some ways, and there's some nice surprises in that department too.
Yes. I got one last piece of news here. Last month we did that very well-received podcast about the making of the Marx Brothers in a Nutshell documentary, and we thought it would be only fair to give equal time to the other well-known Marx Brothers documentary, The Unknown Marx Brothers. So we have contacted one of the producers, John Scheinfeld, and he has expressed interest in joining us in an upcoming episode. So look forward to that, and you might want to pick up that documentary as well. And you know what? Both those documentaries work well together. They're not competition. They're not covering the same ground. So we'll get them both. And that's about it.
And anyone else out there who might be thinking about making a Marx Brothers documentary, keep this in mind.
The guy who should be making one might be joining us next month, but we might be going out on a limb here promoting it because we have no idea whether he will be able to get online. But Mr. John Tefteller has committed to joining us, and he has told us his son will get him online, but we'll believe that when it happens. So while you might want to pencil John Tefteller in for our next podcast, do not use a pen.
He will be coming by the miracle of wax cylinder. Right, so that's I think that's as far as we can go. Thank you very much for listening. If you enjoyed it, you know what to do. If you didn't enjoy it, you know what not to do. And we'll be back again very soon with more of the same. Time for the final song, and I've decided it should be this.
Mr. Grover, you are just a quack to me. Though I may insult you, don't talk back to me. We should have more harmony where discord now prevails. Luckily, I'm in command. Just watch me boost our sails. Bring on the girls. Strike up the band. Flywheel in command.
Mr. Flywheel, you say you're the man who will improve things. Won't you tell us, Mr. Wolfjay, how then can we move things?
Tell us, pretty flywheel.
Tell us now. Tell us how. Tell us now.
You gotta sing while you sell. Sing while you sell. Get that money in the till. Give the customers a thrill. There's a way if you've the will to sing while you sell. They'll buy no pan without Chopin. Sell this weenie with Rossini. And this Verdi goes with Verdi. Yes, you'll make a lot of friends if you'll sing a sweet cadenza. Sing while you sell. Sing while you sell. Sails will mount up to the skies. You'll dispose of merchandise if you like to vocalize and sing.
plantation, all the cotton was rotten away. Then I come to the South Salvation by putting on a hot sale on cotton today.
Way down upon the Swanee River, that's where this cotton grows.
First they pick it,
yes, they pick it.
in the cotton, then they stick it.
Then they weave it into clothes and fancy hose.
This jacket svelte is made of felt, but it feels more like a mat. If the felt should itch, you could make a switch and wear it for a hat.
This is an American Navy girl. Every night, 2 sailors wait to convoy her home.
This steppin' gay is recherché and fits both slim and stout. To smart affairs, my lady wears this step in to step out.
This is known as a California dress. On a clear night, you can see Catalina.
This daring gown has stormed the town. Its lame will not crack. As a special offer, Phelps will proffer a free belt in the back.
This is a bright red dress, but Technicolor is so expensive.
This Eton coat right off the boat, of quality unbeaten, is the only cloth the cultured moth has never, ever eaten.
I'd like to buy a bassinet, the one I have is scratched.
You love our special bassinet with a lullaby attached.
Rock-a-bye, baby, on the treetop. When the wind blows, the cradle will rock, rock, rock it, baby. Rock-a-bye, baby, on the treetop. When the wind blows, woo, your little cradle will rock, whoa, rock it. When the bow breaks, the cradle will fall. Down will come my baby, my little baby. Down will come my baby, baby in the cradle, and oh, go to sleep, go to sleep, go to sleep. Close your eyes and go to sleep, oh mammy cries, she'll sing a lullaby. Lullaby, lullaby. Mammy's gonna rock you to sleep. Lullaby, bye, bye, baby. Rock, 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 cradle. Sleep, 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 Jackson. Shoot the talcum to me, Malcolm.
Cut the price of rugs in half. We've cut our rugs today. There's a rug sale on in a rug salon where we're cutting rugs in a solid way.
Chichoni, ain't I corny? Come on, wacky, Nagasaki. Sales will show a big improvement. See what's getting in the groove. Then swing, while you go out, out, out. Swing,
Marx Brothers Council podcast is hosted by Matthew Conium, Noah Diamond, and Bob Gassell, and is produced and edited by Bob Gassell. If you enjoyed the show, please show your support by leaving us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast provider. Matthew Conium's books, The Annotated Marx Brothers, and That's Me, Groucho, The Solo Career of Groucho Marx, are published by McFarland. Noah Diamond's book, Give Me a Thrill, The Story of Alsatias, The Lost Marx Brothers Musical, is published by Bear Manor Media. Both can be found at major book outlets. Please visit our website at marxbrotherscouncilpodcast.com. Also look for us on Twitter. And for the place to talk Marx and meet fellow fans, join us on the lively Marx Brothers Council Facebook group. This is Heidi Gassell. We'll see you next time.